All righty. Well, nice to see everybody this morning. We are going to talk about some cool stuff. Mr. Burkett, good to see you, man. Welcome in. So, Taryn Turner, today we were going to talk about, we've got some good questions that came in on Slido. We're going to hit that towards the end of the day today, but we discussed, you and I, that is, talking this morning a little bit about training. We've been looking at the Smart Sheet. And I'll just share that for the sake of having something cool to look at besides my backdrop. Looking at the Smart Sheet, and there are some tools down here towards the bottom when it comes to staff development and training new hires and some different elements there, but you've got some things that you were going to go over that you've developed for some clients. And I thought it'd be cool if I made you share the screen, or do you want me to share the screen? I mean, I don't like handing over power, but the ring of power, it's deceitful if you hold on to it too long. So do you want to share this morning, or do you want me to share on your behalf?
Yeah, I can start out with a good share.
Oh boy, I love that. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and then you can take over the share.
Let's go for it.
Awesome. So Taryn, we had some thoughts around just training in general, right? Like, how would you frame up? We had some conversations yesterday about how we can meet people and where they're at. What would you say is the summary of what you're going to talk about today?
Well, training is obviously the important baseline for your new hires. And when you don't have a good training program, or it's hectic, or it's confusing for your new hires, they're not going to be their best selves for you. And then you only have yourself to blame when they're not performing well. You can't really get mad at the people if you didn't train them right.
Right.
So it did take a while to come up with some tried and true training methods. And there's always the question of dry training versus live training and how to incorporate both, especially if you don't have a training bench or somewhere specific you can train people that isn't actually serving customers at the same time. So not everybody has that option. So it was a lot of trial and error to get to a good training point.
Awesome. And we've done both, right? Like we've tried it on both sides. And I think that roasters ended up going at least with some initial training that happened kind of in a dry setting and then throwing them in live, maybe working on pulling shots, ingredients, like giving them some flow tests and then jumping them into a live setting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you're doing live, you really got to make sure to be patient, because obviously you can do something 2-3 times as quickly as this person you're training. So you're trying to get through customers, but you're also trying to give the barista a chance to do things themselves and to make mistakes, because they learn from mistakes, and to just kind of sit there and watch them do these things. And at the same time, keeping up car times, making sure your customers are happy. So a lot of things you're juggling when you are doing that live training and having that barista in there. So at least when you do get to that point where you can do some dry training and just have a machine they can at least go through the motions on and practice pulling shots, steaming milk, building drinks away from customers, yeah, it does give them a better base for when you do some live training. So at least they're a little less nervous, because people can be very nervous and shaky, because especially in a coffee environment, everybody's looking at the baristas making drinks. The car's right there, the people are right there, you're making drinks right there. This person has no idea what they're doing. They're just shaking, they're nervous. And you got to be like, just focus on your hands, on what you're doing, tune them out. So we did work through a lot of training scenarios, and to get to this is more of just like the first 5 days training outline that we came up with. You want me to jump right into this?
Yeah, boy, man, I am interested and excited. Let's jump right into this thing. 5 days.
Perfect. Yeah, so we call our first day, day 0 or day 1. And it was mainly the introduction, orientation, maybe going through employee paperwork. And then I would always start them out with, as a barista, you want to get the base of what is coffee? What's our history of coffee? Where does coffee come from? How is it prepared? How do we prepare it? And then, of course, we'd go into the history of the company they're working for. So they have a good background of not only the company, but maybe if you are a franchisee, the owners of that company, why they decided to run that company and their current involvement in the company, or however detailed you want to get. Because the more information the barista knows, the better they'll be and the more they'll care about where they work. So giving people a good history, a good culture, and then a good overview of coffee I always like to remind people coffee is still hand harvested, and it takes people about 1,000 hand-picked cherries to get 1 pound of roasted coffee. So when you drop one bean and you just think, oh, that's just one out of the 10,000 I have in this bag, you really got to care about it. Every bean is important. Every bean was handpicked halfway around the world from somebody who might not be getting paid as well as you, and brought here and roasted and crafted and is now being made for a customer. So you really instill in them a care for the product they have, so that they in turn care for the product they create for the customer.
Awesome.
Sorry, Taryn, can you say that one more time, your cherry analogy?
Oh yes, so it takes about 1,000 coffee cherries to get 1 pound of roasted coffee.
Okay.
So by the time they get dried, sorted, the bad ones thrown out, shipped, you lose some, ship it to the roaster loses some, they roast some, they might throw some out, they bag some. That's 1 pound of coffee.
I like it. Thanks.
It's incredible.
And then day 0 to, we might have, I have another sheet that kind of went more into detail for, I called it day 1 on this one. I'm just kind of the story of coffee, history of the company, the coffee, and then going into what is espresso and giving them, the very fancy scientific definition of espresso. Espresso is water at about 200 degrees Fahrenheit, pushed through 20 grams of finely ground coffee, 120 pounds per square inch of pressure, equivalent to 9 atmospheres for 25 to 30 seconds to produce double ristretto shot, between 1.5 and 2 ounces of liquid consisting almost entirely of crema, a polyphasic colloidal foam that begins to settle immediately. And so you kind of, that's tuned down to their version when it comes to the grams, the time, and the output. But then people kind of get like, whoa, okay, it's not just I'm pushing a button, but there's this magic science happening behind it. And then you can give them the brief definition of what espresso is, and it's just coffee brewed under pressure. And then going through the difference between espresso and other coffee methods. So basically, still day 1 is just giving your barista a pretty good leg to stand on, as they're going to be the coffee experts. The customers are going to be asking them questions. They may not understand it all at once, but they're going to have a pretty good idea leaving that day, especially when you give them information, you have it printed out for them to take home with them. It's not just sitting in their head. And then normally at the end of this day, I will go to an espresso machine and describe an espresso machine. And that's also included in the training manual as well, a breakdown of the espresso machine with labels to all the parts, what they are, why they work. So you give them kind of the why and the how of espresso and what's going on in there. Then you can pull a couple of shots, drink them. You can pull some bad shots and good shots, have them compare them side by side. You can show them bad shots and good shots so they can kind of see the difference and start to visualize. Day 0 can be, a bit of an overload. So I always do, on the next day, we do, why aren't you leaving? There you go. I don't know if I put it in this one. We'll normally do like an overview on the next day after they've slept on it and they might have questions. We go through equipment knowledge and all that good stuff. So, it can be a pretty long day 1. I think I had 1 to 2 hours here. I think we ended up doing 3 or 4 hours eventually.
And is it back and forth, T? Like, is there a lot of back and forth? How would you say training has worked best for you? Like, probably not just presentation style, but is there some back and forth? They ask questions, question and answer. Do you have them do anything with hands-on, or is it all pretty much just giving them knowledge and letting them ask questions?
Yeah, it's knowledge and questions, and then hands-on. You want them to touch the machine, feel the portafilter, the group head, get a good sense of what everything is with their hands, and then you hope they ask questions. You give them opportunities to ask questions, and then you realize the ones that might not ask questions, you kind of get a good feel for who's who.
Typical setting, how many people are you talking to at the same time, T? Like, do you have a recommendation on this kind of a training format? How many people you'd like to have at a training?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've gone one-on-one mostly. I've done a few times where I'll group in the orientation, history, just like things where you're sitting down at a table.
Yeah.
But once you stand up and you get hands-on, we like to make it one-on-one.
Go ahead. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, so what we outlined eventually was before we had a training bench, we do live training. We would send the barista to our best managers and their stores and train with them for a few days. So we actually would send a barista to one store for a couple of days and train with that manager. And then we'd send them to Ben at another store and train with that manager. And then after the first week of training, we'd evaluate them, see do they need more training with the manager. And if they don't, then they go to the store they were hired for and start training with that manager. And so that manager then gets to train them for about a week, sometimes 2 more weeks. Yeah, that's kind of it without getting too detailed on exactly how we did it. We would do shots first and then milk and then flavor. So you kind of build the drink based on what's the important factors of an espresso drink. So they'd spend a few days working on shots and then a few days working on milk. And then they'd combine shots, milk, and flavors to actually start crafting drinks.
I know those players that you're mentioning. Did you guys choose when you chose best managers? I feel like obviously Ben and Jarek are very different personalities. Did you send them to each one because they were different personalities and because they would probably get an emphasis on different things from the different players you put them with before you put them at their homestand, or how does that work?
No, I'm pretty sure that was accidental.
Yeah, but it looked really
But it
masterfully
worked
designed.
good. Yeah. They were two completely different, sides of the coin when it came to their personalities. So it kind of worked out pretty well. I mean, then they'd also give you feedback on the new hires too. They'd be like, they're doing well, they need more work in this. So when you do send them to the manager of the store they're going to be working at, you can provide the feedback to them, be like, this is what they've excelled at, this is what they need to work on. And so then that manager then has a good base, and then they're not actually working with them fresh, but they're working with them with a good base, and they can throw them in there live and train them while they're still working their shift and helping customers.
How soon until you include them into your schedules, T? You know what I mean? Like you sent them to the 2 different stores to go work with the managers, they're getting their training, then you send them to their home store. When are they considered a body that's actually included in what would be, your matrix for scheduling?
Training would be a minimum 2 weeks, and then you'd give them a test. You give them, you'd visually test them, and then you give them the written test, which is more about recipes. And so after 2 weeks, if they pass the tests, then they're considered a full on hire. They can earn tips, they can work shifts. If not, you might give them another week. If they need more than 2 more weeks, then they're probably not going to work out.
Right. I was going to ask you, like, when do you determine like this guy is not like this dude is not built for what we do? Like, how far into it would you recommend that?
Yeah, I mean, if they're not improving, or if they don't pass the first test, you give them another week, they don't pass that test, most of the time they're not going to work out unless you have a really good feeling about them and some kind of circumstances you can convince yourself in your mind to give them another week.
You're desperate. You're desperate, or they've got good energy, right? Like those are some of the variables.
Yeah, but no more than 4 weeks. If they're not working out after 4 weeks, then they're not going to work out.
That's good. How much do you gauge it based on their ability to integrate to team? Obviously, we've talked a lot about like the tech, of like they understand coffee, they understand how it's pulled. They hopefully aren't turning their back on the guest. They're smiling. They're having good interactions with the customer base. But how much do you include team dynamic into a training scenario?
Yeah, that's a great question. When we go over the culture, you kind of explain to them you're going to be working one-on-one with somebody for maybe 5-6 hours. It's just 2 of you, you're 2 to 3 feet apart, you're working in tandem. Like there's no leniency when it comes to getting along with somebody. Like you're both there with the same goal. If you can't get along with people you're working with, like we just can't have you around. Because solo shifts were rare then. It can happen, but we really want you to get along with people. So it's more about the kind of people you're hiring. Are they people who are just, yeah, I'm at work, I'm just working with somebody, we can get along no matter if we have differences or what. We're just here to work, we're making money, we're serving customers. So if you get a really good sense once you introduce them, and then you can ask the other baristas how they're feeling about the new barista. And it seemed like most of the time people were just pretty happy to be there and working.
That's good.
And then, what was I going to say before you asked that question?
Dang it, I
was,
derailed you. Shoot.
oh, it was about scheduling them. So yeah, after 2 weeks, they pass their test, they're good to go. Then we'd start scheduling them real shifts. I'm trying to schedule them with people, and then you get a good gauge on them. And then maybe once they've been working with people after a month or so, you can give them solo shifts, unless you're desperate. Then people would give them solo shifts and just watch them the first little bit and make sure they're doing okay. But it's also good because then they get to work in a teamwork environment outside of a manager, and you can kind of walk in and look at them, make sure they're doing well, get the feedback from the other barista on what they need to work on still, and then you can start scheduling them the solo shifts.
And would you pretty much keep them to the stand that they were hired for? Like, I noticed that some of the pain points I've seen with some clients is when they're tried to be used at multiple stands, that the flows are different. Even if, as much as you're trying to standardize and you want all of your stands to run the same way, sometimes the flows seem different. So do you try and keep your new trainees pretty honed into one location until they get their feet, and then that's where you would consider them being able to pick up other shifts?
Yeah, exactly. You want to make sure they get a pretty good idea of how to flow, and then how to change that flow if they switch stores. So you definitely don't want to give them too much to worry about by letting them switch stores too soon.
Awesome.
I think we would even, once we got up to a spot where we were big enough, it would be people who've been working with us for a year, have the flexibility to start picking up shifts at other stores when they're needed.
It's awesome. Corey, Tasha, do you guys have anything that comes to mind or things that you would like to share? I know both of you guys have trained lots of people, have put lots of people into stands. Do you guys have any thoughts or other just things you'd like to throw out? Questions?
I have a question, Taryn. So when you're training your people, are they actually taking cars and helping actual customers, or are you just kind of going through your manual and teaching them drink by drink? Or I guess, yeah, are they like fully doing it with that person that they're with, or is it kind of a acting scenario?
Yeah, so early on in the days, you might give them, if there's downtime, acting scenarios. If you're really busy, sometimes they just get thrown into the window to talk to customers, or you might just give them one thing to focus on. So they might just pull shots and be like, we're busy, just keep pulling shots, we'll use them. Just sit there, pull shots, pull shots, pull shots, or steam this milk, steam this milk. You give them the milks to start steaming. So in those first week, they're not really doing it all together. They're building pieces of it and just doing the parts of the whole drink. The second week, you're kind of very much focusing on, you're actually building the customer's drink. If there's downtime, we're quizzing you, we're asking you about recipes, we're giving you scenarios. But if there's customers, you're building their drink.
Gotcha.
Yeah, one thing that you touched on, Taryn, that I think is really important, and I certainly did with all of my hires, is I was very upfront of just saying, hey, being a barista is super rad. It looks super fun, but not everybody has the ability to be a barista. So I'm just really upfront right from the get-go. And that kind of sets the tone of saying, you know, as we go through this training process, like we're going to know, like we know where those benchmarks are at, and we're going to check in with you on those benchmarks. So through our training process, you know, we had the packet, we go through the similar flow of what you've laid out here, which I think is incredible. But along the way, as soon as we started getting into the drink making process in the packet, we would have checkpoints of quizzes, and they would not move on to the next point until they passed that quiz. And if they came in and they just were not prepared, we would straight send them home. Go home, you have one more chance. Go home, get this memorized tonight, come back tomorrow. We're going to quiz you. You get 100%, or, you know, or we're done here. And I think that that's really important, of setting that kind of tone and expectation right from the get-go, because the more diligent that you can be in the training process is going to save you a lot on the other side of things. So just putting in that hard work of doing the training. And really fighting the urge of rushing it when you're in major super need, because that's always going to be there. And you're going to want to try to rush a person through a process, and you're only setting them up for failure, which is going to then set your team up for failure. But also, like you were just saying there too, I think it was super fun. Even times when I was on bar and we weren't making drinks, like we'd say, okay, how many shots go in this, or how many pumps of, go in this, and just having that kind of like fun banter, if you will, in that part, I think is really fun, and it really brings them into the team element, which is something that we really emphasized in the training process, as well as what was the expectations of being a part of our team. What could they expect as far as the culture? What expectations do we have of them? And I had an acronym of team that we would use, that we'd walk them through in that training process as well.
What was your acronym?
Yeah, that's weird.
Stop
I
there.
feel like he always teases us up too. He always makes us beg. Like, I had an acronym.
It was team. So T stand for thermostat or thermometer. In any given environment, you're either setting the tone or you're just kind of adapting to whatever is. So the idea is that we wanted a team full of thermostats. They're always just kind of cranking the heat up and holding that accountability and that expectation high. E was excellence. Excellence in all that we did. Excellence in customer experience. Excellence in the drink making process. And we would pursue that excellence by just following a 1% rule. 1% better each shift. 1% more efficient. 1% more knowledgeable. Because if I come to show up for my shift with that expectation of what's that 1% that I can learn today, then I'm only increasing my capacity. That's also increasing our team's capacity. And then A was attitude, but I focused on a specific kind of attitude, an attitude of gratitude. I would just tell the people I'm really drawn towards people that are just grateful. They're just high on life. Like those kind of people are infectious. I want to be around those people, and to just find those things that we can be grateful for. Grateful that I have a job here. Grateful that I get to interact with my guests that are coming through every day. So that attitude of gratitude. And then me, the old saying, there's no I in team, but there is an M and an E, me, meaning that I am responsible for my attitude. I am responsible for my pursuit of excellence, and I am responsible for being that thermostat and not the thermometer. So there you go.
Good stuff. Good stuff. What was this crazy hashtag, Tasha? What was the crazy hashtag you threw out last week?
Yeah, do you remember it?
No,
There's no way. I talked about it on the second call. I was like, I would have failed. I wouldn't have even got the job.
Hashtag BlackRock Eugene, fuel your story.
That was, it had to have the hashtag. If it didn't have the hashtag, it didn't work.
I love it. That's awesome. I'm totally stealing that, Corey. That was rad.
Do it.
No, it's good. What do you guys think about bringing in baristas? Obviously, as you're doing your hiring, as you're vetting, Tasha, we're in a lot of hiring right now with you guys, like trying to figure that out and that process. What do you guys think about hiring people who have done coffee for other entities? You know what I mean? Like, obviously, a lot of people have worked with Starbucks. A lot of people have worked with some of the other bigger players that are out there. Do you guys feel like those are assets that people bring to the table if they've been in those other places, or does that actually work against you because they bring a different culture, a different mindset?
Sometimes it goes both ways. I love seeing people that have been in the coffee industry, because at least I understand that they know they're walking into a busy environment. They know they're walking into a customer serving environment and what a team looks like, so those kind of things that can culture shock some people that have never been in coffee. I love that. On the other end of things, just Starbucks oriented, I would say. Here at the Bean, I kind of talked about it last week. We don't have specific jobs. Like, somebody's not going to be on bar. You're not going to be on the register. We just kind of dance. If Thru was here right now, he'd be laughing because he's like, where's the flow? And I'm like, you just got to learn to dance, dude. Like, we just go. Like, and he's like, it works, but like, I literally can't, like, there's no rules. You guys all just know the rules. And it's just, you're in and it happens. So they come in, and I've had a few people that are like, okay, so I'm going to stay on the register today. And I'm like, you're going to ring up that car. Then you're going to come over here and you're going to make this drink. And then you're actually going to run back there. And they're like, oh my God, like, this is nuts. So once we can kind of wrap their head around it's different, but we're all here for the same reason, we all have the same culture history, we can move past it.
That's awesome. What do you think, Mr. Burkett? Hire from the outside, or you want noobs?
I could go either way as well. I mean, you just kind of get a feel for that person in the moment. And sometimes when people would come in and they say, I don't have any coffee experience, I'll be like, that's actually not a big deal. In some ways, I almost kind of prefer that, because then we can teach you the right way from the get-go.
Yeah, that's good.
But even at my one location, we did hire somebody that had previously worked at a Starbucks. We'd also had a couple of people that were previous Dutch folks.
Yeah.
So just setting the tone of culture, like, here's who we are. We seek to offer a genuine experience, a genuine interaction, and we like to have fun while we're doing it. So I don't have necessarily a preference either way. So much of it is just the person. Like, if you have just a strong personality and a person that you feel is just really teachable, then you've got a winner.
It's awesome. Taryn, what do you think? Give us some opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It comes down to personality. People would always say it's easier to train new habits than to retrain old habits, but it really comes down with who you're hiring. If they're a very strong-willed person and they might have been doing something the same way, they might think, well, this is the right way, I'm going to keep doing it this way. You could probably tell that when you're interviewing them, especially you notice they've got coffee experience, so you might be telling your interview that direction. But I've had success both ways, because sometimes I think probably the best person to hire is a person that wants that job, regardless of if they have, the experience or not.
That's good. I know one of our clients that we had, and Taryn, was actually one that you came and opened the store with them and did their grand opening and like created their whole manual and created the whole training process. One of their new hires had a lot of coffee experience, but it was at a much slower pace, like not a drive-through setting. Like they were sit-down cafes, and he wanted to get super artsy in the way that he pulled and the way that he poured and all those different things. And I know that was a real pain point of like, no, brother, like we got to move faster than that. This isn't like your standard pour over. Like this is like, I mean, everybody hates to be called this, but this is fast food coffee, where like people are coming through our window. We want them at the window no longer than about a minute. You can't spend a bunch of time. What are your guys' thoughts on that when it comes to people understanding speed, service, strength were the three for roasters, but something along those lines of culture when it comes to understanding speed?
That would be a hard one, because there would almost be two different types of coffee experience. There was like the third wave coffee experience of the slow bars and the 5-minute lattes, and you get somebody like that, and yeah, it's really hard to retrain those old habits because they care in a different way, and it's great coffee, but it's just a different business model. So those are the ones that almost impossible to retrain.
Tasha, Corey, do you have any experience with that?
No, I never really ran into a scenario where somebody came from kind of that third wave bent, but I could see that being a huge challenge of getting them to ramp up that needed speed within that second wave that we find ourselves in.
Well, I think especially because you think you're right? Like that's what it comes back to with what you're saying, Taryn, right? These guys feel like they're sincerely right. Like, no, this is the way that coffee was meant to be treated. This was the respect you're supposed to give the bean. You know what I mean? Like they've got,
and they're probably right.
They are probably right.
But they're in the wrong spot.
You're going to help them get in with the guy down the street that only has a sit down and no drive up.
Yeah.
It hasn't been a problem, but I've definitely had some new hires come in that are like, wait, you don't do latte art,
Yeah.
And like, I'm like, no, so sorry.
Okay.
They know because we cover that latte art up with whipped cream and a lid.
That's right.
Yeah, it's like, no, it's down there. Don't worry. No. So yeah, I'm like, no, not like that. It's not like that here. But yeah, it's never been a problem, I would say. It's just more so teaching them that's not our focus.
That's good.
Our art goes on the lid with hearts and
It's a different kind of art, much less technical.
Yes.
Hey, Aaron, touching back on the training thing real quick. One thing that just came to mind that I think is very important to have is almost think of it as ongoing training. And that's one thing that we would do, is that we would randomly give pop quizzes to our team. And we'd kind of give them hard drink combinations that they'd have to come up with and that sort of thing. And we'd also tie in, like, give a customer's name. What's their drink? that was part of the quiz as well. So
Right.
we always wanted to make sure, again, that was that 1% pursuit that we just wanted to always have. But I think that incorporates with the training, that your training isn't just a once and done. It's an ongoing thing that you need to check in with your team, because there were many times where we would have somebody, bring them on, and of course, they're going to be working night shifts, most of the time.
Right.
And we would check in, and come to find out, a few months down the road, that even people have been with us for 6 months were making a drink wrong.
Yeah.
And the only way that we found that out was by doing those quizzes. So I think that's something important to have it as part of the rhythm.
And quizzes are way better than Yelp, right? Like way better than somebody that's dropping stuff on Yelp saying, I don't know what they served me in that evening shift, but that was awful, right? Oh, that's good. What do you guys, I know we've gotten to a place with some of our clients where they actually do quarterly raises, and that raise is very much dependent on them being able to pass a quiz, pass a test as part of what they're being trained on. And it gives that barista or whoever's working there, obviously there's a cap. Obviously you can only get so many of those until you've graduated to the point you're not going to get any higher at this role. You would need to bump up to an assistant or bump up to a manager or bump up to a regional for a continued pay increase. But it's like, each quarter, their opportunity to make more money is by them continuing to excel at their skill. So.
I've never given a quiz at a review. Actually, Taryn, is that something you guys did? Or Corey? I feel like that's actually, it's a good incentive. I mean, we give raises based off of other things, but that's smart.
Yeah, we'd give verbal quizzes, because at that point you want them to be able to give a response verbally like they would if you were a customer. So it wasn't a handwritten quiz, but you would actually ask them, and the questions would be very hard. It'd be when you start adding in the extras, when you start combining sugar-free with regular flavors, when people want non-fat, when people want all these extras, you start making the questions pretty tricky.
How many questions would you ask?
Oh, probably 20.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and it'd be about pricing too. So not just building drinks, prices. And then, yeah, customer is always helpful. Culture, what's going on.
I like it.
I think Ben's got it written out too, so we could get that to you, Tasha.
Yeah, I definitely want to peek over it.
Yeah. Corey, what about you, brother? Any thoughts? Oh, sorry, you muted. There.
Mute, unmute. No, I think 20 questions is about the perfect number. And as far as like incorporating that in your check-ins, that's one rhythm that I tried to create, was quarterly check-ins. And we didn't offer that every single time. I think it just totally depended on that team member. And if my manager felt like that person just needed to have that kind of assessment, then that was incorporated within it. But normally we would try to do those like as a whole team, like if we're going to do it, everybody's going to do it. So then that, and especially as we prepare for like a large team meeting, we would have one of those beforehand to see if there was anything that surfaced that we needed to cover on the operational side of things.
Interesting. That's good. All righty. Well, Taryn, thank you for that. I'm going to take us over to Slido and look at some of the questions that were asked, and then we can continue having some conversations. So once again, for those of you who have the upgraded 5-star, there is some new training stuff that's here, and then I'll make sure I drop in Taryn's if they're not already included in the comments as well, so you have everything all in one spot on your smart sheet.